I had clearly achieved the top score in the entire province. Yet I secretly applied to a remote national defense university instead of telling my parents and my fiancée. I decided to live the rest of my life under a hidden identity, dedicating myself to scientific research, and never wanting to see them again. In the week before leaving, I decided to spend time with them peacefully. I no longer got angry because my parents favored raising my cousin Makoto. When my parents asked me to give the best things to my cousin, I neither quarreled nor resisted. When they wanted me to give up my university admission spot, I just nodded calmly. Even when my fiancée decided to marry my cousin, I did not hesitate to call her my cousin's wife. Everyone thought I had finally grown mature. However, after I left, they eventually discovered Makoto's true nature. By then, regret came too late, and they could only spend a lifetime seeking redemption. Chapter 1. Summer of 1983. Teacher's Office of Revival High School. Teacher Mao. I've made up my mind. I want to study, but instead of the quota for Peking University, I want to switch to the National Defense University. In the cryptography department, the late autumn wind carried a chill. My thin body stood upright, my eyes filled with unwavering determination. Teacher Mao froze for a moment, then burst out in joy. Wang, you've finally come to your senses. I thought you gave up your Peking University spot for your cousin just to marry Willow, but you must know, the cryptography department of the National Defense University is highly unusual. You'll need to erase your identity. Live under a hidden name. Have you discussed this with your family? No need to discuss. I can decide on my own. At the mention of family, a trace of pain flashed in my eyes, but quickly faded. Once I disappeared from their world completely, perhaps nothing could be taken away from me anymore, because years ago, when my uncle drowned saving me from the river, my parents took in my cousin, saying I owed him a life and must learn to yield. To compensate for that so-called debt, my parents gave all the good things to my cousin. Even my fiancée fell in love with him. Both family affection and love had been taken away. Now, in order to steal my admission to Peking University, my parents forced me to agree, and Willow even suggested exchanging it for a marriage certificate. Last night, lying awake on the small bed on the balcony, I thought it through for hours and finally realized the truth. This time, I will no longer yield. Instead, I choose to sever ties with them, never again wanting to be entangled. The red maples blazed like fire. Walking along the cold streets, my lonely figure passed among blue-uniformed workers finishing their shifts. They rode bicycles with happy smiles on their faces. The bustling, noisy world no longer belonged to me. A jeep stopped beside me, blocking my path. Get in. The window rolled down, revealing a cold, beautiful face. Willow looked impatient as she said, "Did you explain it clearly to the school?" I stayed silent. Of course, I had explained it, but not in the way Willow ordered, giving up my Peking University quota. Instead, I had chosen a place where she would never find me. Before I could answer, Makoto leaned out from the back seat, waving a pile of things in his hands. "Cousin, look, sister bought me so many things, clothes, shoes, even a radio. She said that going to Peking University, I mustn't be looked down upon." My gaze locked onto the necklace around Makoto's neck. My expression shifted drastically, my heart pierced as if by a chisel, blood flooding through my body. It was the heirloom left to me by my grandmother, the token of love I had given Willow. I never imagined she favored Makoto so much that she would give the necklace to him. Willow noticed my eyes and felt a flicker of embarrassment, but soon she regained her composure and spoke calmly. "Makoto likes it. Anyway, it's not something valuable. After we get the marriage certificate, I'll buy you something better." Bitterness filled my heart. The necklace itself was cheap, but what mattered was the love it represented. In Willow's words, it had become insignificant. Of course, Willow never truly loved me, so she would never treasure it. When Makoto heard the words marriage certificate, jealousy flashed across his eyes. He deliberately put on a pitiful expression and burst into tears. "Sister, cousin doesn't look happy. Is he blaming me for taking away his Peking University spot? I'm sorry. It's my fault. I shouldn't have stolen his things. I deserve to be unwanted." Willow could not stand seeing Makoto upset. Her face darkened like water, and she glared at me viciously. "Makoto's life has already been hard enough. You have everything. Why must you still fight him?" She hurriedly stroked Makoto's head to comfort him, whispering, "Don't worry. The Peking University quota is yours. No one can take it from you. Go home on your own and reflect. When you figure it out, apologize to Makoto. Otherwise, I will never forgive you." With that, she slammed the accelerator, driving away resolutely, leaving only clouds of dust behind. From the back seat, Makoto looked at me with a triumphant, mocking grin, his face filled with schadenfreude. Choked by the dust, I coughed violently, tears streaming uncontrollably down my face. See, I hadn't said anything, hadn't done anything, yet everything was still my fault. I stood there for a long time, until a maple leaf fell on my shoulder. Through my thin clothes came a bone-piercing chill. Once, when I had nowhere to go because of my parents' favoritism, It was Willow who told me that with her, the world would never lack love, but even the woman who once swore to love me forever had changed her heart. The sky was overcast, wiping away the tears at the corner of my eyes. I pulled a piece of white rabbit milk candy from my pocket and gave a bitter smile. I had treasured that candy for years. It was a gift from Willow. She told me that whenever I felt sad, I should eat candy, so that life would taste a little sweeter. I could never bring myself to eat it, and had saved it until now. But now, the candy had spoiled. Just like Willow's love, rotted into garbage. I tossed the white rabbit candy into the sewer, along with my biased parents and my faithless fiancée. I wanted none of them anymore. Chapter 2. As soon as I returned home, I heard laughter inside. Looking up at the sky, the fiery clouds resembled a mocking face, ridiculing my lonely and desolate figure. Ever since my parents brought Makoto into the family, I had become utterly redundant. Just because my uncle saved me and lost his life, I had to yield endlessly, from toys and clothes to my parents' love, and eventually even my fiancée. I felt like a wandering ghost drifting through the world, silently standing at the doorway. The laughter inside was like a sharp knife stabbing into my heart, blood seeping down to the floor beneath my feet, forming a giant shadow that engulfed me. I pushed open the door. Instantly, the laughter vanished, as if my presence had disturbed their perfect family harmony. My mother glanced at me and pointed to a small stool nearby. On it sat a bowl of rice with only a few vegetables, while their table was filled with fish, pork, and beef. Since childhood, my parents claimed that my cousin needed nutrition to grow, so they always gave him the best and forced me to be understanding. I was made to give up my seat, my food. Now, all I had was a broken little bed on the balcony, eating leftover vegetable scraps. But my parents never considered that I was only half a year older than Makoto, and I too needed nutrition. My mother stood up deliberately, placed a piece of fish in my bowl, and smiled. "This is your favorite dish. Hurry, sit down and eat." Expressionless, I said, "Mom, I'm allergic to fish." The one who likes fish is cousin. This time, my mother did not snap at me impatiently as before. Instead, she looked into my eyes and, rare for her, spoke gently. "Did you explain everything to the school? You gave up the Peking University spot to your cousin, right? You're good at studying. You can take the exam again next year." I remained silent. Her face changed, and her tone grew sharp. "How could you be unwilling? You owe your cousin a life. Giving up the Peking University spot is nothing. You should know better." No matter how many times I had experienced it, my mother's favoritism still cut deep into me. My father put down his chopsticks and suddenly slapped me hard across the face. His expression was furious, as if I were his enemy. "How did I raise such an ungrateful son? If you refuse, then get out of this house right now. I have no son like you." My head buzzed, my cheek burning red from the slap. Facing my parents' wrathful stares, I felt as if countless blades were slicing me apart, my body trembling uncontrollably. Makoto wiped his tears, wearing a pitiful look. "Don't force cousin anymore. It hurts me to watch. Maybe I was just never meant to study. It's not his fault. It's only my fault that no one loves me." My parents immediately rushed to comfort him, promising that I would give up the Peking University quota, and that they would buy him many gifts. Only then did Makoto stop crying. Looking at my pale face, he said, "Cousin, I never wanted to take your things. If it bothers you, I can leave." My father exploded with rage again, glaring at me viciously. "Are you satisfied now? Stirring up chaos in this house? Apologize to your cousin immediately." I wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth, sweeping my gaze over the people before me. These so-called blood relatives were, at this moment, all conspiring to drive me to death. Just as my father was about to hit me again, Willow finally spoke. "George has already agreed to give up the Peking University spot. He explained it to the school today." Only then did my parents' faces ease, and they snorted coldly. After a moment of thought, my mother fixed her eyes on me. "At least you know your place. Since your cousin is going to study, then you should go to work and earn his tuition. Remember, this is what you owe him." I stared blankly at Mother, the woman who gave birth to me, unable to comprehend how she could speak such cruel words. But she seemed not to care about my reaction. Her tone was firm, commanding. "Once summer vacation is over, you'll go to work. You're doing nothing at home anyway." My father nodded in agreement. Then the whole family began discussing how to host a banquet for Makoto. After all, being admitted to Peking University was a matter of glory for the entire family. No one paid any attention to me. My existence was like a household trash bin, mentioned when needed, discarded without hesitation when not. I didn't know when I ended up lying on my bed, my heart numb from pain. Staying in this loveless home, the suffocation made it impossible to breathe. The sheet beneath me, used for over a decade, was moldy and damp, barely covering half my body. Meanwhile, Makoto had a bright, spacious room filled with toys and candies bought from the supply store. I had only the narrow, leaking balcony, enduring the wind, rain, and snow for 10 long years. In the sweltering summer, my heart felt frozen. Looking at the night sky, I thought, just one more month, and I can leave this loveless place. Since this family doesn't need me, then I'll disappear forever. Chapter 3. That night, I had a dream. I dreamed of my childhood, when my parents held me tenderly in their arms, their eyes filled with love. Willow, 2 years older than me, pinched my little cheeks and said, "So cute." I seemed to be immersed in a warm spring, unwilling to wake. But then, as Makoto appeared like a nightmare, my parents' faces twisted into hideous grimaces, shouting at me. Willow also left me, walking farther and farther away, crying. I called out, "Dad, Mom, Sister, don't abandon me." I desperately tried to chase them, but beneath my feet yawned an endless abyss. I fell, surrounded by despair and pain, unable to struggle. My parents and Willow never turned back. They circled around Makoto and walked into the distance, and I was left to sink forever in endless darkness. The sound of fireworks outside woke me. I opened my eyes, my pillow soaked with tears. I had thought I would never be heartbroken over them again, but deep down I still longed for love, for recognition. Fortunately, it was just a dream. A jeep drove into the yard. Seeing the tall man who got out, I hurried downstairs. "George, I heard you were admitted to Peking University." "Not bad." The tall man was Willow's father, an old family friend. Once, my father had saved his life, and thus a childhood betrothal was arranged. Sam was perhaps the only one who genuinely treated me well. Sam patted my head, then glanced at his daughter and nodded, "At least you know how to do the right thing." Setting off fireworks to celebrate George, Willow frowned. "Dad, this wasn't for George." George said he didn't want to study, and gave his Peking University spot to Makoto. "Makoto will study hard and live up to everyone's expectations." Sam's face darkened, and he was about to scold her, but I quickly stopped him. Forcing a smile, I said, "Uncle, you've just come home. Please rest first. I'll explain another day." I didn't want Sam to dig deeper. Otherwise, the fact that I had applied to the cryptography department of the National Defense University might be exposed. I only wanted to leave quietly, without further entanglements. Sam's face shifted. He glared at his daughter, then stormed off angrily. The scene was left with only Willow and me. Expressionless, Willow said, "Don't tell my dad about the marriage certificate for now. And about giving up the Peking University spot, you'd better come up with a proper explanation. Understand?" I lowered my head and muttered an acknowledgement, showing no reaction. Willow, in order to help Makoto attend Peking University, was even willing to marry someone she didn't love. Truly, what a noble sacrifice. She continued, "Makoto is still young and fragile. You mustn't mention the marriage certificate in front of him. Also, yesterday I told you to apologize. Why haven't you done it yet?" Before I could respond, Willow pressed on, sharp and unrelenting. "Makoto will soon go to Peking University. Give him some fabric and food ration coupons. That will count as a sincere blessing from you." Seeing how Willow thought of Makoto in every way, I felt as though a boulder pressed against my chest, suffocating me. I asked, "Do you really think I still have any coupons left? With your affection and my parents' favoritism, does he lack anything?" Willow froze, finally remembering my situation. A flicker of complexity crossed her expression. "Don't worry. Since I promised to marry you, I will keep my word." Willow could only use marriage as a way to comfort me. "Sister, are you really going to marry cousin?" Willow's face changed drastically. She quickly turned toward the doorway. Makoto was standing there, holding the doorframe, his face pale and filled with deep pain. "It's not like that." Before Willow could explain, Makoto suddenly began banging his head against the wall, speaking through tears of anguish. "I don't want sister to marry cousin. I like sister too." Makoto looked utterly distressed. Willow panicked instantly, pushing me aside and rushing forward to hold him. My parents also came out. Seeing Makoto in that state, their faces turned tense. The three of them quickly helped Makoto into the car and rushed toward the hospital. Before leaving, Willow cast me a cold glance, her tone icy. "Do you see now? You deliberately upset Makoto, didn't you? I never thought you could be so cruel." The disdain and rejection in Willow's eyes struck my chest like a heavy blow. Whatever Makoto desired, as long as he showed even a little sadness, the whole family would rush to his side, and somehow every mistake became mine. The image of Willow's angry expression kept flashing through my mind. I told myself, "Don't grieve for a woman who no longer loves you." Makoto's little tricks were easy enough to see through if one paid attention. There was a time when Willow couldn't stand how my family favored Makoto. In my darkest moment, she stormed into the house, pulled me out, and told the entire courtyard that no one would ever bully me again. Back then, Willow was truly good to me. She gave me many gifts, but at some point, she changed. From disliking Makoto, she gradually grew to pity him. Makoto seemed like my nemesis, always able to take away everything from me. I watched the car drive away, my face cold, tears dripping onto the ground. This would be the last time I felt sorrow for Willow, and the last time I mourned for this home devoid of warmth. From now on, I would live for myself, dedicating my youth to building society. When I returned home, I began tidying the cramped balcony. In a broken box were all the gifts Willow had given me, ranging from puppet toys to a single autumn leaf. I had once treated her gifts as treasures, unable to throw them away, but now they felt like nothing more than rubbish. I gathered them all, carried them into the courtyard, and set them on fire. Along with those gifts, I buried my love for Willow in the flames. Just as the fire was nearly finished, Willow returned to the courtyard and caught sight of the scene. Seeing the burning puppet, her face shifted dramatically, and a wave of fear surged through her heart. Chapter 4. Willow's voice trembled slightly as she looked at me in disbelief. "George, these are the gifts I gave you. Why would you burn them?" Something seemed to slip out of her control, leaving her with an inexplicable panic. I stared at the burning wooden doll until it turned into a pile of charcoal, then slowly turned my head, meeting her gaze with utter calmness. At that moment, Willow felt as if the boy in front of her was about to leave her. I took a deep breath. As the gift turned to ashes, a certain obsession inside me was finally released. I no longer agonized over which parent loved me more, nor over who Willow truly cared about. None of it mattered anymore. I had to walk my own path. The gifts got moldy, so I burned them. Instinctively, I wanted to come clean with Willow, to tell her I no longer loved her. But remembering I still had more than 20 days before I would disappear, I could only endure it. Willow let out a breath of relief, nodding. "It's fine to burn them. They weren't worth much anyway. After we get the marriage certificate, we can buy new ones." I gave a faint smile. We would never get that certificate. There was no after. Willow convinced herself that aside from her, George had no other choice. It was impossible for him to leave. Her earlier worry must have been unnecessary. Her expression returned to one of superiority. She frowned, displeased, and said, "Don't keep such a long face. Makoto lost his parents. He has depression. He can't take more stress. You already have everything. There's no need to fight." I gave a bitter laugh, laced with sarcasm. "Then tell me, what exactly do I have? Parental love? A fiancé's care? I didn't even own a decent piece of clothing. Makoto had stolen everything that should have belonged to me. And now, what else was I supposed to give up?" But Willow couldn't stand to hear my complaints. She grew impatient. "Don't you still have your parents? And me? Makoto is suffering in the hospital right now. Go apologize to him." I thought I misheard her. Makoto's so-called depression was clearly an act, yet they all pretended not to see it. My tone grew cold. "He already has my parents by his side, plus your care, and an entire staff of doctors and nurses. Do you really think he needs me there?" Willow grew angry, scolding, "How can you have no compassion? Makoto's depression is your fault, no matter what. As his cousin, you must be more generous. The fact that you still don't realize your mistakes shows I've spoiled you too much. George, don't say I didn't give you a chance. If you don't go to the hospital, then we'll put off the marriage certificate." With that, she stormed off, as if threatening me with marriage would make me obey unconditionally. I ignored her, watching calmly as the car drove away. Back home, I wanted to pack my things and leave, but realized in this vast house, there was nothing worth taking. That night, when my parents returned, they gave me unfriendly looks, as though blaming me for upsetting Makoto. My mother came up to me, face stern. "George, you should step aside for Willow. Makoto also likes her. He's in the hospital threatening suicide. As his cousin, you ought to be magnanimous." Even knowing my mother favored Makoto to a twisted degree, I hadn't expected her shamelessness to reach this level. Her words, in the blazing heat of summer, felt like a merciless cold wind against my face. Expression numb, I stared into her eyes, my voice hoarse. "Mom, I'm your own son. You've always said I should give way to Makoto." I agreed. "Haven't I given up enough all these years? Every new thing in this house, every piece of meat on the table, new clothes at New Year, even my room, didn't they all go to him? I gave up studying at Peking University, and now even Willow. What's next? If he wants my life, should I carve out my heart for him too? Mom, am I even your son?" I could no longer control my fury. The question burst out from the depths of my soul. My mother slapped me across the face, her expression filled with disappointment. "He's your cousin. He lost his father because of you, and you still dare say you don't have enough. Your father is right. You're an ungrateful person. This time, you must give way, or you're no longer my son." Leaving behind those cruel words, she turned and walked away. Leaning against the doorway, I looked up. The setting sun above me seemed like a merciless mocking face, laughing at me as if I were the biggest joke. In their eyes, I was so fortunate. Not long after, Willow returned to the yard, blunt and commanding. "George, Makoto's mental state is very poor. Our marriage registration will be delayed." She wasn't negotiating, she was ordering, but with enough disappointment accumulated, I no longer felt sorrow. Pale-faced, I pulled my lips into a grim smile, and said, word by word, with utmost seriousness, "Fine." Chapter 5. Willow hadn't expected me not only to remain calm, but to agree so readily. For a moment she was at a loss for words. frozen in place for a long time. I didn't look at Willow. My gaze fell on the parasol tree outside the courtyard, and I recalled the year I was 11. When Makoto framed me, my parents strung me up and beat me black and blue before throwing me out of the house, desperate and abandoned. I crouched beneath that tree, sobbing. It was Willow who came to me, stretched out her hand, and smiled gently. "Come home with me." Back then, she stood tall, like a ray of light piercing into a world of darkness, illuminating my life, giving me hope and something to lean on. Willow wanted me to be admitted to Peking University, to fulfill my dream. So when the college entrance exam was reinstated in 1978, I secretly worked hard, and eventually secured a place at Peking University. I had believed I could always follow in Willow's footsteps and stay by her side forever. But now it all seemed nothing more than an illusion. Like mist that vanished upon touch, the Willow standing before me had completely changed. Step by step, she forced me to compromise, for Makoto to attend Peking University. She would even marry a man she did not love. Truly, what a noble kind of love that was. When Willow said the marriage registration would be delayed, I felt nothing but calm. I no longer held any expectations for her. Now she said it would be delayed. Next she would break her promise. By then I would lose my chance to attend school, and Willow would never marry me. That much was certain. Fortunately, I had not yielded my admission spot at Peking University. In just over 20 days, I would leave this sorrowful place for the National Defense University, cutting ties with them once and for all. George, don't overthink. Since I promised you, I won't go back on my word. It's just that Makoto's mental state is unstable, so I don't want to upset him. Seeing how calm I remained, without anger or protest, Willow grew uneasy and couldn't help but explain. I withdrew my gaze from the parasol tree and suddenly asked, "Willow, do you still remember what you promised me under that tree when I was 11? Willow's expression shifted, as if recalling something. Guilt flickered in her eyes. Just as she was about to speak, a guard ran up in a hurry, face tense. "Commander Liu, news from the hospital, he's hurting himself again." Willow frowned deeply, no longer caring about me, and hurried into the jeep. Watching the vehicle drive away, I turned back into my room. On that small balcony, there was nothing much. After burning Willow's gifts, all I had left were a few shabby, thin clothes. Besides my own life, my parents had given me nothing. What they once gave, they had all handed over to Makoto. Willow was gone for a full week. During those days, she and my parents stayed at the hospital, caring for Makoto. I felt liberated, free from having to see Makoto's sickening face or endure my parents' favoritism. I sought out Sam, hoping to train my body and prepare early for the National Defense University. Since I had decided on the cryptography program, I would face many dangers in the future. Sam didn't think much of it, believing I was motivated. He taught me without holding anything back. Another week passed. One day I was training in the courtyard, drenched in sweat but full of vigor. Now I no longer lived for Willow's dream of Peking University. I lived for myself. Seeing this, Sam was deeply moved. This was the spirit of a true soldier. Though Sam didn't know exactly why George was training so hard, he had his suspicions. He chose not to say anything. Young people had to resolve their own affairs. Still, he felt that the favoritism of his old friends next door was somewhat disgraceful. As someone often on missions away from home, it was hard for him to interfere. But if George needed help, he wouldn't hesitate to offer some support. This peaceful life was eventually shattered by Makoto's return home. I was practicing horse stance in the courtyard when I looked up and saw my parents and Willow walk in, surrounding Makoto with laughter. Makoto clung to Willow, acting overly intimate, even rubbing his head against her. My parents pretended not to see, even seeming pleased by it. Willow didn't push him away, until she noticed my gaze. Only then did she hurriedly shove him aside. Makoto's eyes reddened instantly. "Sister, do you despise me?" Willow's face flushed with embarrassment. She could only allow him to lean on her again. As he entered the house, Makoto glanced back at me, his eyes full of provocation and mockery. My expression remained calm, as though the four of them had nothing to do with me. I focused on my training. An hour passed quickly. Finishing my workout, I exhaled deeply. In the height of summer, a rare cool breeze drifted through the courtyard. I closed my eyes, savoring this rare comfort. The National Defense University. The trembling voice came from behind me. I opened my eyes and saw Willow holding a magazine, panic flashing in her eyes. Chapter 6. Willow accompanied Makoto back to his room. By chance, she noticed a magazine about the National Defense University lying on the small bed of the balcony. A deep unease surged within her, and she quickly hurried downstairs to question me. "Why are you looking at information about the National Defense University?" Facing Willow's interrogation, my expression remained calm. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I picked up a towel and wiped the sweat from my face. "Say something." Willow grabbed my hand, her body trembling slightly, as though she were about to lose the most important thing in her life. I gently pried open the hand I had once wished countless times to hold. At this moment, there was no ripple in my heart. I smiled faintly, I was just looking casually. Willow stared into my eyes. Seeing no sign of a lie, believing I would never lie to her, she felt a wave of relief. She nodded and let out a soft hum. There's really nothing worth looking at. With your physical condition, you're not suited for the National Defense University. It'd be better to study hard and take the college entrance exam again next year. Your grades are good. You'll have another chance. I responded ambiguously. Do you really think I still have a chance? My parents want me to start working after the summer to earn money for my cousin's tuition. I'll be leaving soon. Willow's face changed. She opened her mouth but hesitated, as if realizing she had wronged me these past weeks. Her tone softened. Don't worry. I won't let you go work. Money isn't a problem. You can rest easy. I've already prepared enough funds for Makoto's studies. I let out a bitter laugh. Look at that. Willow really was good to Makoto. She thought of everything. Not only did she force me to give up my admission spot at Peking University, she even took care of his tuition fees. Truly, what a happy family they made. I could clearly see the panic in Willow's heart, but I knew it wasn't out of love for me, just a sense of guilt. I was certain that the moment Makoto caused trouble, my biased parents would force me to work to pay for him, and Willow would remain silent. Fortunately, I no longer cared. Willow saw my silence and mistook it for jealousy. She couldn't explain why, but suddenly she felt that although George was still standing before her, it was as if he were about to disappear. The feeling of losing control overwhelmed her. George, I will marry you. Believe me, it's only a matter of delaying the time. Willow's voice was firm, unquestionable. In the past, I would have been overwhelmed with joy, but now, I merely gave a soft, oh, my calm, detached expression, making Willow even more restless. Upstairs on the balcony, Makoto happened to be watching the two of us below, his eyes burning with deep resentment. That night, I went to bed very early, not only because I didn't want to see my biased parents shower Makoto with their meticulous care, but also because I was exhausted from the day's training. The next morning, at dawn, I left home for school. In the teacher's office, I met a man in military uniform. His whole presence radiated firmness and strength, naturally commanding respect and admiration. He introduced himself as a professor from the cryptography program at the National Defense University. Besides his current mission, he was also assigned to take me to the school. The cryptography program at the National Defense University was unique. It belonged to the early admission track, so it didn't require the normal application process, nor were admission letters issued. Instead, professors personally escorted selected students to a secret place for training. After finishing the handover work, the professor said he would return to the school in a week to pick me up. On my way back, I couldn't stop picturing him in his uniform, and my heart surged with longing. One day, if I studied hard and devoted myself to my country, maybe I could become like that too. Even though my family was cold, devoid of love, hope was reborn inside me. I began to look forward to the day I would join the National Defense University. When I returned to the courtyard, the sky was already darkening. My parents were nowhere to be seen. Entering the house, I found Makoto sitting on my small bed, looking at me with an air of superiority. Cousin, it seems sister likes me more. Makoto sneered mockingly. See, as long as I want it, everything of yours becomes mine. So why are you still staying in this house? You might as well hurry up and die. But I already had a new hope in my heart, so his provocations didn't matter anymore. Makoto had thought he could drive me crazy again, force me to break down as before, kneeling in pain while he laughed wildly. But now, seeing me remain calm was like landing a punch on cotton. His face turned ugly. Makoto hated that feeling. Remembering Willow's promise to George earlier that day downstairs, his jealousy spiraled out of control. Even after his self-harm, Willow had only delayed her marriage registration with George. She had not truly chosen him. That was why he couldn't resist provoking me again. Yet my indifference only fueled his jealousy further. Madness flickered in his eyes. He suddenly grabbed me, his voice laced with icy menace. Tell me, if you pushed me downstairs out of jealousy, who do you think they would believe? My face paled. I struggled to break free, but before I could, Makoto shoved me hard. Help! Don't kill me! He smashed his head against the wall, covering his face in blood, then ran downstairs and collapsed beside me. I had fallen from the second floor. My body slammed against the floor, the pain stealing away my breath. Makoto's screams immediately brought my parents and Willow rushing over. The three of them quickly arrived, taking in the scene. Without asking a single question, my father kicked me in the stomach and roared furiously. How could you do this to Makoto? I stared blankly at my parents' twisted, enraged faces. Every word I wanted to say lodged in my throat, choking me silent. I closed my eyes, and it felt as if a knife had been brutally stabbed into my heart. Chapter 7. I never thought your heart could be so cruel. To want to kill out of jealousy, you're worse than a criminal. I have no son like you. My father's eyes were bloodshot as he looked at me as though I were an enemy, kicking me hard twice more. My mother held Makoto in her arms, sobbing bitterly. I'm sorry. I only stepped out for a moment. I didn't expect such a disaster. Makoto, hold on. I'll take you to the hospital right away. Makoto's face was covered in blood, looking terribly serious, though in truth they were only surface wounds. His pitiful screams clutched at my parents' and Willow's hearts, but out of their sight. He gave me a vicious, cold smile. I had fallen from the second floor and was far more seriously injured than he was. I couldn't even speak. After being kicked a few more times, my body curled up like a shrimp, but the pain in my body was nothing compared to the wound in my heart. My parents had never believed me. No matter what I said, it wouldn't matter. They placed unconditional trust in Makoto. It was several minutes before I managed to get to my feet. My face had turned deathly pale, my body trembling uncontrollably. I couldn't help glancing toward Willow's face, full of disappointment. Makoto cried pitifully, "Cousin, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have clung to sister, asking her to stay with me. I know you hate me. If my death would make you happy, I'll give you this life. There's no need to make aunt, uncle, and sister suffer for it." I stared coldly at Makoto, watching his performance, then turned to my parents' angry faces. Darkness and despair filled my vision. I had already grown used to loneliness and sorrow. I was ready to let go of my parents and Willow. Those worthless relatives meant nothing to me anymore. So why did Makoto still insist on framing me again and again? Suddenly, Willow slapped me across the face. Her beautiful eyes were icy as she snapped, "I already said we'd get the marriage certificate. Why would you hurt Makoto? He's already in so much pain. Do you really want to drive him to death?" A bright red handprint bloomed on my face, blood seeping from the corner of my mouth as I stared at Willow in shock. Just like my parents, she too believed Makoto without question. In their eyes, I was nothing but guilty and vile. I had wanted to explain to Willow, thinking she might at least doubt Makoto's words. Now I realized it was pointless. Willow shook her head, her face full of disappointment. "Your actions have chilled my heart with such ruthless behavior. How can I ever trust you enough to marry you? George, you truly are a disappointment." None of them spared me another glance. They left with Makoto, heading to the hospital. Makoto looked back, grinning at me, like a demon crawling straight out of hell. Only when their car disappeared did I finally lose all strength, coughing up a mouthful of blood and collapsing to the ground. In the silent, icy night, I awoke from numbness, my body stiff with pain. I dragged myself back home. Lying on the bed, I rested a few hours until I regained some strength, treating my wounds alone. The night air was as cold as water, but still warmer than my frozen heart. My parents' and Willow's actions were like a dull blade stabbing through my chest, tearing open another wound in my already shattered soul. I was like a wounded stray dog, licking its injuries on the dark balcony. My tears had long run dry, my feelings numbed into nothingness. Only an empty shell of a body remained. All I wanted was for time to pass quickly. I couldn't stand to stay in this house another moment. This cold-blooded family was like a gaping bloody maw, ready to swallow me whole. Lying in bed, staring at the night sky, I thought of my late grandmother. Other than her, there was no one left in this world who had truly loved me. Drowsiness overtook me, but I was shocked awake by a bucket of cold water. Before I could open my eyes, a tremendous force dragged me into the living room. My parents and Willow had returned with Makoto, though his injuries were nothing but superficial. In their eyes my actions were unforgivable. My father kicked me again, his face dark as thunder. "George, kneel and apologize to Makoto right now. If he doesn't forgive you, then you are no son of mine." Chapter 8. A cold house, a merciless family. My heart, already riddled with holes, shattered once more. My gaze swept over them all, my parents' faces twisted with hatred and disgust, Willow's eyes filled with disappointment, and Makoto's lips curled in a smug smile he couldn't quite hide. These people, supposedly my closest family, hurt me again and again, cutting deeper than any class enemy ever could. It was clearly Makoto who framed me, yet I was the one forced to kneel and apologize. In the past, I would have compromised, trying to salvage kinship, to earn recognition. But now, I hated my very existence. Why had I been born into such a cold-blooded family? My father, seeing me remain defiant, grew darker in the face. He kicked me hard and roared, "Do you still think you've done nothing wrong?" Stumbling, I fell to the floor, coughing up more blood. Willow's expression shifted. For a moment she seemed ready to help me up, but then she remembered what she believed I had done, and thought that a little punishment might still save me. She stopped my father, shaking her head slightly. Only then did he relent. A flicker of hope stirred in me, thinking Willow might actually help. But the words she spoke next made me want to laugh bitterly. Willow frowned, her tone indifferent. "In your current state, I don't think you're fit to marry me. If Makoto weren't lucky, he might already be dead from that fall. As punishment, our marriage registration must be delayed. To make it up to Makoto, I'll hold a wedding ceremony with him first." My entire body trembled. I stared at Willow in disbelief. What kind of punishment was this? Sensing the sarcasm in my eyes, Willow felt guilty, and her face twisted with annoyance. "It's not a real marriage. I only want to make it up to Makoto." My parents and Willow all stood protectively in front of Makoto, as if guarding against me lashing out violently. but they were disappointed. I didn't rage or resist. Instead, I smiled brightly, spat out a mouthful of blood, and grinned. Then congratulations in advance to my cousin and my new cousin-in-law. Are we done here? If so, I'll go rest now. Dragging my battered body, I shuffled toward the balcony, not sparing them another glance. Makoto wiped at his tears, pretending to be pitiful. Cousin, when sister and I hold the wedding, you'll come, won't you? Even if it's just for show, I'll be satisfied. I hope to receive your blessing. My father snorted. Don't worry, even if he doesn't want to come, I'll drag him there. Does he think he can commit wrongs without paying the price? My mother shouted at my retreating back, if you don't come, then get out of this house. Willow didn't know why, but seeing George without his usual jealousy left her feeling deeply uneasy. She had no intention of truly marrying Makoto, it was just for appearances. In her heart, she believed George had lost himself to jealousy, that he couldn't be allowed to go astray again. If this time he could learn his lesson, maybe there was still hope. After the wedding, she would sit down and talk with him. But that single phrase, cousin-in-law, and the look of relief on George's face pierced her heart like a thorn. Why did it hurt so much? After that, none of them paid me any more attention. They didn't care whether I would die from my fall, nor whether I might run away. In their eyes, I cared too much about this family, and loved Willow too deeply, to ever leave. But in this vast world, I had no place to belong. Over the next 3 days, I made no fuss. I simply stayed home to nurse my wounds. Meanwhile, my parents and Willow happily prepared for the wedding. The ceremony was to be held at a state-run restaurant, a luxury beyond most people's reach at the time. But to please Makoto, my parents emptied their savings and spared no effort. The day of the wedding arrived. I had already packed my things early, waiting for the professor from the National Defense University to come for me. My parents and Makoto had gone ahead to the state-run restaurant to receive guests. Since Willow was in the military, she didn't wear a wedding dress. She came up to me. George, come with me later. What I'm having with Makoto is just a ceremony, not a marriage registration. Don't worry, I will still marry you. She swore to it with conviction, just like that day when I was 11, thrown out of the house by my parents, crouching under the parasol tree outside the courtyard. Back then, she had brought me new hope, promising never to leave me for a lifetime. But it hadn't been that long, and Willow had already completely changed. My face remained calm. I only gave a faint Relief washed over Willow. She had feared I might cause a scene at the wedding today, but seeing me like this, she assumed I had learned my lesson and would behave from now on. She insisted on bringing me to the state-run restaurant. Yet when she looked at me, she didn't see the expression she wanted, and it left her doubtful. I answered her words with unshakable calm, as though the woman in front of me was no longer my beloved fiancée, but merely a stranger. Just as Willow tried to pull me into the car by force, a guard came to report that the restaurant couldn't wait any longer. Only then did Willow relent, warning me that I must attend, or else there would be no marriage in the future. I watched her hurried figure leave, my face expressionless. Picking up my woven bag, I walked out of the courtyard. As soon as Willow's car departed, the car from the National Defense University arrived at the gate. The professor asked if I wanted to say goodbye to my family. I turned back for one last glance at the courtyard, this place that had carried 15 years of pain. I never wanted to stay there again. Biased parents, a betraying fiancé. I never wanted to see them again. No need. I quickly got into the car. At the cryptography program of the National Defense University, my real identity would be erased. I would live under a new name for the rest of my life. For the rest of my days, I no longer wished to be my parents' son, nor Willow's husband. I would be myself, dedicating my entire life to my country. As the car passed by the state-run restaurant, I saw my family standing at the entrance, welcoming guests. My parents and Makoto wore faces full of happiness. Willow looked shy, her expression tinged with anticipation. The four of them looked so well matched. The car slowly pulled away. The four figures at the restaurant gradually vanished from sight. I, George, was about to begin living a life that truly belonged to me. Chapter 9. At the entrance of the state-run restaurant, Willow suddenly felt something and lifted her head sharply. The jeep carrying George had already driven away. For some reason, a wave of panic washed through her heart. Father Wang and Mother Wang were all smiles, telling everyone it was a double blessing. Not only had Makoto been admitted to Peking University, but he was also marrying the prettiest woman in the compound. Willow felt uncomfortable. Whether it was the admission spot at Peking University or this marriage, those things should have belonged to George. She had only agreed in order to cooperate with Makoto's treatment. But listening to their tone, it sounded as though it was all natural, as if it had always been Makoto's by right. Makoto pressed closely against Willow, scanning the crowd with pitiful eyes. Why don't I see cousin? Didn't he promise to come and give us his blessing? Or is he angry and doesn't want me to be happy? If I had known, I should have knelt and apologized to him. Makoto put on his pitiful act again. Father Wang's face darkened as he snorted. That ungrateful thing. I regret ever having such a son. He's not even a tenth of what Makoto is. Mother Wang nodded in agreement. George is far too immature. Not coming to his cousin's wedding. Never mind that he bullied Makoto before. Makoto was generous enough not to hold grudges, but just days ago he almost killed him. And now he dares to show us this attitude. When we get home, he must be taught a lesson. The Wangs reached a consensus. On Makoto's big day, George ought to show some grace. Makoto added fuel to the fire, lowering his head. Maybe he likes sister. I never truly wanted to take her away from him. I just wanted to fulfill the dream of getting married. After the ceremony, I'll give her back to him. If cousin is upset, then let's not hold the wedding at all. This tactic of feigned retreat never failed. It reignited the Wang's fury once more. Hearing their curses and picturing George's face in despair and pain, Makoto felt thoroughly satisfied. Willow, meanwhile, kept staring outside, restless as George never appeared. The reason she had agreed to the wedding was not because she truly wanted to marry Makoto, but only to fulfill his wish. She believed George shouldn't be so petty, that he would surely understand. After all, it was a matter of life and death. Yet in her mind, George's indifferent expression kept resurfacing. As the wedding ceremony was about to begin and George still hadn't arrived, Willow could wait no longer. She turned and started walking out. Makoto quickly tried to block her. Sister, are you going to leave me? Willow spun around, her sharp gaze piercing into Makoto's face. In that instant, Makoto was startled. He forgot to continue pretending to be pitiful. Rarely had he seen Willow look so terrifying. Her heart was in turmoil, overcome by the sense that something terrible had happened. A voice inside her screamed that she had to go back. I'm going to fetch him. This time, Willow ignored Makoto's tearful act and strode away. On the way back, she realized she had been careless. She should have explained clearly to George that this wasn't a real marriage, only for show. Driving as fast as she could, Willow rushed into the courtyard, ran through the gate, and straight to the balcony. George, stop being so stubborn. Everyone's waiting for you. She pulled back the curtain. The narrow, damp little balcony had been cleaned spotless. The folding cot was shoved into a corner. The only low desk he had used for studying stood in the center, with a note left upon it. This family, I don't want any more. Willow, goodbye forever. Just 2 short lines, yet they struck her heart like a hammer blow. Willow forced herself to remain calm, muttering, George must be joking. He wouldn't really leave. In her mind, George had nowhere to go, and he couldn't bear to leave his parents or her. She knew his nature well. He had endured years of humiliation just to stay by his parents' side, craving their love, but everything before her filled her with dread. Refusing to give up, Willow searched the courtyard. As time passed, panic overtook her. George's traces had vanished. The crabapple tree he had planted for her at 15 was gone. The red ribbon he had tied to the swing for her blessing at 17 was gone. In a rush, Willow ran to the parasol tree outside the courtyard. She remembered George's favorite place, where he buried his deepest secrets in the soil. His longing for his parents' love and recognition, and his secret affection for Willow. All of it had been sealed in little jars beneath that tree. But what she saw made her feel struck by lightning. The soil had been dug up, the jars smashed, their contents reduced to ashes. In that moment, Willow finally realized a terrible truth. George had truly left. Chapter 10. Willow crouched beneath the parasol tree, staring blankly at a pile of ashes. George's departure had long shown signs, yet no one had cared. A child who had never known love would leave so decisively. He had burned the gifts she gave him, destroyed the beautiful memories, and left without even taking a single parasol leaf. It was only a fake marriage with Makoto, just to fulfill his wish. Willow had never said she was abandoning George, so why did he have to leave? Even now, Willow couldn't understand, and never would. All she felt was that the summer air grew heavy, pressing suffocatingly on her chest. A hot wind swept through, scattering leaves from the parasol tree. Willow looked up in a daze, as though she saw again that child, crouched beneath the tree after being cast out by his family, crying in despair. She had once stretched out her hand, smiling. From now on, you won't be alone. That night beneath the cool moonlight, George's eyes had shone with light, but at some point, he had grown numb, turned into a walking corpse, becoming once again that abandoned child. Perhaps it was the day she suggested exchanging the marriage certificate for the Peking University admission spot. She still remembered George's shocked expression. In truth, Willow had always known about George's secret love for her. She simply never responded, afraid of gossip, until Father and Mother Wang came to her, asking her to persuade George to give his Peking University spot to Makoto. Willow knew she shouldn't. She knew perfectly well how important Peking University was to George, but at that time, needing an excuse to delay the marriage, she rashly proposed the exchange. She hadn't expected George to agree without hesitation. She thought that since George was so talented, he could easily excel again in next year's exams. Then they could silence everyone and be together as before. But George seemed to have misunderstood, choosing instead to abandon everything and walk away. He won't have gone far. Suddenly, Willow stood up. George had nowhere else to go, so she mobilized every contact she had. She would search bus stations, train stations, anywhere, determined to find him. But after half a day, even with the entire compound helping, there was still no trace of George. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The commotion alarmed Sam. His daughter's abuse of authority was a serious matter, so he hurried home. Seeing her dejected figure at the door, his angry words caught in his throat, turning into a sigh. Sam had a rough idea of what his daughter was thinking. He first called off the search to prevent her from making a grave mistake, then spoke his guess aloud. George went to study. Willow's head jerked up, her face full of disbelief, but the admission notice from Peking University isn't due for another half-month. Sam sneered. Who told you George went to Peking University? He applied to the National Defense University. Willow's body trembled violently, as though struck by lightning. Sam, unable to bear seeing his daughter so broken, thought of everything George had endured all these years. He spoke with bitter disappointment. I don't know what you're grieving for. When he was right in front of you, you didn't cherish him. Now that he's gone, who are you pretending to be heartbroken for? Wasn't George driven away by you all? His words numbed Willow completely. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words would come. Countless images flooded her mind. All these years, Father and Mother Wang had doted on Makoto beyond reason, tormenting George until he could hardly live. She had known it all, and once, she had been George's guiding light. But what had she done? Not only had she failed to stand by him as before, she had helped in their cruelty. She suddenly recalled that day, 3 days ago, when Makoto claimed George had pushed him down the stairs. George had looked at her with eyes full of longing for even a shred of kindness. But she had believed Makoto without hesitation. Worse, she had slapped George across the face. That slap had shattered every last hope George still held. Sam knew nothing he said would reach her now. He no longer bothered. In his eyes, considering the way Father and Mother Wang and his daughter had treated George, the boy should have left long ago. George was a good child. Only by escaping his original family could he ever find happiness. Sam had offered to help before, but George's stubborn nature had made him cling to hope for the Wang's affection. That only led to endless misfortune. If it were me, I would have left long ago. Sam spat the words bitterly and strode away. As a senior officer, he had no time for his daughter's entanglements. Standing in the living room, Willow reflected on George's reactions these past days. Perhaps, from the moment she proposed the exchange, he had already given up. She thought again of that night, when George had asked her with utmost seriousness, "Do you still remember your promise back then?" Willow sank to the ground, clutching her head in pain, drowning in regret. The night was cool as water. Suddenly, hurried footsteps echoed outside. Mother Wang rushed in, her face frantic. "Willow, Makoto thought you abandoned him. He's gone mad at the restaurant." You. Listening to Mother Wang's endless fretting, full of nothing but concern for Makoto, Willow's mind roiled in turmoil. She suddenly lifted her head. "Why does he come to me when he loses control? In your eyes there's only Makoto. Do you even know where your real son has gone?" Chapter 11. Mother Wang's face froze in shock, tinged with embarrassment. What are you saying? How could I not care about George? He's my own son." Willow stared into her eyes, hoping to glimpse even the faintest trace of concern, but there was none. From beginning to end, Mother Wang had only ever shown impatience toward George. Disappointment filled Willow's heart. She gazed out the window and said softly, "George has gone to study. He will never come home again." Mother Wang's face changed drastically. She grabbed Willow's hand, eyes flashing with anger. "Study? What study? Didn't he agree to give up his Peking University admission to Makoto?" "No. Wait, the admission letter isn't even due for another half-month. That boy has been no good since he was little, always lying. When he comes back, I'll make sure to teach him a lesson." Willow's heart shook violently. She felt sorrow for George. He had already left, and yet his own mother still only blamed him. Losing her patience, she shook off Mother Wang's hand and said coldly, "George went to the National Defense University, not Peking University." Mother Wang's face darkened, her curses venomous. "What right does he have to go to the National Defense University? What about Makoto? We've already announced it publicly, and we're about to hold a banquet to celebrate his admission. What is George thinking? Does he really hate to see Makoto do well? No, you have to bring him back, no matter what. He must give up the Peking University admission spot." Mother Wang tugged on Willow's hand, trying to drag her outside, as if George had committed an unpardonable crime. Willow had been about to resist, but one sentence from Mother Wang froze her in place. "Makoto tried to kill himself. There was so much blood." Willow hesitated, her expression wavering. In the end, she had no choice but to follow Mother Wang to the hospital. After all, it was because she had left that Makoto's spirit had collapsed. She bore some responsibility. On the way to the hospital, Willow had already decided, once Makoto's condition stabilized, she would confront him directly. From then on, she would no longer involve herself in his affairs. For now, her only thought was to find George as soon as possible and tell him the truth. When the two of them reached the door of the ward and were about to push it open, they suddenly heard Makoto singing. It didn't sound like depression at all, rather, his mood seemed quite good. For some reason, Willow felt uneasy. Something about Makoto seemed off. She recalled what George had once said, that his cousin's depression was an act, that he wasn't ill at all, only pretending in order to steal what was his. Before, Willow had thought George was being unreasonable, lying out of jealousy toward Makoto, but now, after George's despairing departure, her mind was stirred. She stopped Mother Wong with a slight shake of her head, signaling her not to rush in but to listen first. Father Wong had gone to fetch water, leaving only Makoto in the room. Makoto showed no sign of being sick. He sat on the bed with one leg crossed arrogantly over the other, grinning with shameless pride. That bastard must be furious by now. I've taken his parents. I've taken his Peking University admission. And now even his fiancée is mine. Sure, it's just a fake wedding, but all I have to do is throw a tantrum and those two idiots will help me. Force sister into the bridal chamber. Once I've had her, why would I fear she might regret it? I really am too clever. His voice was low, but the ward was so quiet that every word carried clearly to the two outside. Mother Wong's face went slack with disbelief. She thought she must have misheard. Willow's fists clenched tightly, her dark eyes blazing with endless fury. What had she just heard? Makoto had been faking all along, and now admitted he intended to steal everything from George. First his parents, then his Peking University admission, and finally, even her. A chill swept through Willow's heart. She could hardly believe that such malice could exist in a person. He had called George a bastard. He had called Father and Mother Wong idiots. Was this really the same meek, obedient Makoto from before? Willow turned toward Mother Wong, her heart sinking with grief. For the sake of such a beast, they had driven away their own son. How laughable. Recalling everything George had endured, Willow wanted to slap herself across the face. They had been wrong, terribly wrong. They had been played for fools. And when Makoto spoke of sealing the deal, so Willow could never escape, a cold shiver ran down her spine. She could no longer contain her fury. With one kick, she flung the door open. The smugness on Makoto's face froze instantly. His body went rigid, terror filling his eyes. Auntie, sister, how long have you been here? Before Willow could speak, Mother Wong stormed forward, grabbing him by the collar. Her voice thundered with rage. Why did you lie to me? Chapter 12. Makoto's face was full of terror as he fell to his knees, yet his eyes darted around, already scheming for a way out. Mother Wong's face was ashen, unable to believe such words had come from him. She had treated Makoto like her own son, willing to pluck stars from the sky for him, neglecting George because of it. And how had Makoto repaid her? By calling his cousin a bastard, by calling them idiots. Mother Wong raised her hand to strike him, but Makoto let out a loud wail, dropping to the floor and howling pitifully. Auntie, I was wrong. Those weren't my true thoughts. It was just a hallucination caused by my mental illness. I dreamed that cousin framed me, that you didn't want me anymore, that sister abandoned me too, so I started spouting nonsense. Ah, it hurts. Halfway through his words, Makoto began smashing his head desperately against the floor. Mother Wong, seeing blood spreading across the ground, faltered. Her expression softened with distress, and instinctively she wanted to help him up. Makoto sensed her change of heart and felt a surge of joy. Everything you've done to George over the years, I will investigate it personally. Willow's tone was icy cold. George's departure had restored her clarity. To have become the youngest regimental commander in the district, she naturally possessed formidable strength. Makoto's face twisted in panic. He tried to keep explaining, but Willow turned and walked out of the ward. Rage burned inside her. If Makoto was truly a hypocrite, then so many things from the past had to be re-examined. She dared not imagine it, that everything had been orchestrated by Makoto, and George had borne unbearable suffering. Just thinking of it was terrifying. Using Sam's network of contacts, she quickly uncovered Makoto's true record, and what she found nearly drove her mad. Since Willow no longer defended him, many people were willing to speak the truth. She even discovered a hidden compartment in Makoto's room, inside of which was a notebook documenting his crimes. February 9th, my birthday. Dad gave me a pair of sneakers. I thought they were ugly. Why was I born into such a poor family? I wish Dad would just die. March 12th. Dad finally died, saving George. But why not saving Willow? If it had been her, I could have used the debt of gratitude to enter the Liu family. Still, the Wong family isn't bad either. Now that I'm fostered in the Wong household, my first task is to drive George to his death. As long as he exists, I'll never have it all. Fortunately, Auntie dotes on me every time I frame him. It works. I really am too clever. Willow flipped through the pages quickly, until she reached an entry from just days ago. Her face turned ice cold. In order to drive that bastard to his death, I deliberately pushed him down the stairs. I didn't expect the brat's life to be so tough. He didn't end up crippled, but it doesn't matter. Because of that, I was able to marry Willow. Willow's fingers turned purple from gripping the notebook so tightly. A blazing fire of fury erupted in her chest, and in that moment, she wished she could tear Makoto limb from limb. So George had been telling the truth all along. So he had suffered so much injustice. Willow thought back to when she was 11, when she couldn't stand Father and Mother Wang's favoritism and had taken George home with her, promising to treat him well for a lifetime. But at some point, she too had lost her way and forgotten her original intention. So many nights and days, when George had been wrongly accused, he had lain on that shabby little bed, quietly licking his wounds alone. Just days ago, when he was pushed down the stairs, Willow had had the chance to clear his name, but instead, without asking right from wrong, she had slapped him across the face. George had left in despair, and her world had plunged into darkness. Willow presented the notebook to Father and Mother Wang. At first, they did not believe it, but once they recognized Makoto's handwriting, their entire worldview shattered. Confronted with irrefutable evidence, Makoto no longer dared to lie. He fell to his knees before them, repeatedly begging for forgiveness. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have deceived you. I only did it because I was insecure, afraid you'd abandon me. That's why I wronged cousin. Please give me another chance. I promise from now on I'll be filial to you." Blood streamed from his forehead, but Father and Mother Wang only looked on coldly. The contents of the notebook were horrifying, laying bare an unspeakably cruel truth. They had abandoned their own son to dote on a nephew, who turned out to be this vicious. Father and Mother Wang exchanged a glance, endless regret flooding their hearts. But was it too late now? Makoto saw that no matter how he hurt himself, he could no longer elicit their pity. At last he dropped the act, his face twisting with cruelty. "Was I wrong to do this? If a man doesn't look out for himself, heaven and earth will destroy him. All I wanted was a better life. Even if I had the chance again, I'd do it all the same." With a furious roar, Father Wang kicked Makoto across the room, then rushed forward to beat him with fists and feet until he cried for mercy. Mother Wang joined in too, striking even harder. The more they had once spoiled Makoto, the more they hated him now. Willow looked on with a mocking expression. "So what if you wake up now? What use is it?" Makoto was beaten until he was half dead, too weak to even cry, lying on the floor like a dead dog. When Father and Mother Wang finally came back to themselves, they turned to Willow, shame etched across their faces. "Can you find George? We've wronged him all these years. We want to make it up to him somehow." Willow gave no answer. Instead, she looked out at the night sky, her voice tinged with confusion and sorrow. "And what if we find him? We already lost him long ago." Father and Mother Wang's bodies trembled. They lowered their heads, eyes brimming with tears. Chapter 13. The southern campus of the National Defense University was a restricted area under strict orders. Besides the stationed troops guarding the nation in the south, it also served as a training base for professional talents selected from various regions. The campus was divided into two sections, one for the troops stationed on the outskirts of the city, and at the very core was a group of students. By late morning, the sun was blazing high in the sky. The tale of summer had yet to fade, and the oppressive autumn heat had already arrived. A group of students dressed in military uniforms were drilling. Despite the scorching heat and sweat soaking through their clothes, they stood as straight as pine trees, their gazes firmly set ahead. As students of the decryption program at the National Defense University, we had to train not only in decryption algorithms but also in physical strength. It had already been half a month since admission. Thanks to the training methods taught by Sam, I managed to endure with my not-so-strong body. The school meals were much better than those outside. Although in 1983 the conditions in domestic schools were still poor, back then, eating meat at home was a luxury. What's more, my parents gave everything good to Makoto, leaving me only vegetables and a damp balcony to sleep on. But here at school, with proper nutrition, I began to grow taller. With my fresh crew cut, I looked spirited, my eyes sharp and bright, no longer the lifeless, heartbroken boy on the verge of collapse. At that moment, I carried a completely new kind of presence. When I first met the admissions officer of the National Defense University, I was already impressed by their demeanor. Now, surrounded by soldiers brimming with martial spirit, thoughts of romance were the last thing on my mind. Military training was to last 3 months. Gradually, I adapted to the university's rhythm, enduring physical training during the day and going to the library at night. I was enrolled in the decryption program, destined to face extremely harsh challenges. I could never reveal my identity. I had to become a true invisible man. Every student in this program was a precious national asset. I cherished this hard-earned chance to study. Here, there were no biased parents, no unfaithful Willow, only the chance to study hard and serve the motherland. I devoured knowledge in the library like a starving man, unwilling to leave even deep into the night. I was not alone. Many fellow students from all over the country were also there, each of them a top achiever back home. Back in my county, I had ranked first. Now, I felt immense pressure. After all, wasn't every classmate here a prodigy? One late night, I left the library reluctantly, sighing at the endless sea of books. Even if I stayed in the library for a lifetime, I could never finish them all. Fortunately, for now, I only focused on the basics of decryption, doing my best to preview before classes. The night was as cool and clear as water. Walking along the path, I stopped to gaze at the sky. Images of home flickered across my mind. Now that I had left, I might never return again. The four of them must be living quite well. At first, when I came to school, despite my utter disappointment with them, I still missed them. Being away from home, one can't help but feel homesick. But as time passed, the voices of my parents and Willow faded. Except for the occasional fleeting thought, there were no more waves in my heart. By now, my feelings for Willow were no longer so intense. In university, I wasn't without friends. Besides my 5 dorm mates, I had also met Anna from Beijing. This girl was very special, completely different from Willow. She was passionate and outgoing, sometimes like a well-protected flower from a greenhouse, yet personally very capable. Her understanding of decryption studies was the strongest I had ever seen. From the moment Anna entered school, she became the campus beauty. Although the National Defense University didn't ban dating, she naturally drew the attention of many boys. Some said she came from a well-off family in the big city. Others whispered that she was here just to polish her resume, and would soon leave. I didn't care about such gossip. I was used to walking alone, but no one expected Anna to approach me first, and even express her interest. This shocked everyone else, and left me speechless. When I reached the dormitory building, I saw a tall figure standing in front of me, smiling brightly as she looked at me. Chapter 14. Anna was very proactive with me. It wasn't really about romance, but mainly about professional discussions. Still, waiting for me at the boys' dormitory entrance in the middle of the night was shocking and unconventional in that environment. The boys returning to the dorm couldn't help but glance over, their eyes filled with innocent yet mischievous smiles. I just wanted to turn around and leave, but seeing Anna standing there silently, clearly unwilling to move until I approached, I had no choice but to walk forward with a stiff face. Anna handed me a notebook, her smile radiant. "Wang, this is my study notes." I looked at the pink notebook, hesitating whether to accept it. I truly loved studying, and I knew Anna was highly skilled. Even before classes officially started, she already had a deep mastery of decryption. She could be called a genius in this field. We met in the library. While other students were still excitedly exploring campus life, I preferred solitude, sitting in a corner reading. The reason I had been admitted to Peking University in the first place, besides my own intelligence, was that I once had an excellent teacher, but I never told my family about him, not even Willow. This was because my teacher had a bad political background. He had been locked in a cowshed during the Cultural Revolution, so people called him Mr. Cowshed. Mr. Cowshed was well versed in both astronomy and geography, a man of vast knowledge, but that was his original sin, and he was branded as part of the 5 black categories. When Mr. Cowshed fell gravely ill with no one willing to help him, I, an 11-year-old, was also thrown out of my home. Framed by Makoto, the two of us, one old and one young, ended up in a ruined temple. Following his instructions, I went to the back mountain to gather herbs. Many times I nearly fell to my death. Thanks to that, Mr. Cowshed survived. From then on, I often visited him at the ruined temple. Gradually, he treated me as his last disciple. He taught me that knowledge could change fate, and urged me to study diligently. He knew more than any high school teacher, teaching with greater depth and breadth. Under his guidance, I gradually became an independent, studious child. Even though I faced extreme unfairness at home, I still kept a kind heart and a belief in serving my country. That was the root reason why I never sank into despair, and managed to hold on until today. Mr. Cowshed had endured countless hardships. By example, he showed me one truth: no difficulty could truly defeat me. Sadly, after the college entrance exam, he passed away. He died on a rainy night. I had wanted to share with him the good news of being admitted to Peking University, but when I entered the ruined temple, I saw only his rotting body. That night, I buried him on the back mountain myself, carrying away only a jade pendant he had given me. At that time, I lost the only elder who ever cared for me, as well as my life mentor. I was in unbearable pain, and the only person I thought I could rely on was Willow. But on that very day, Willow told me she would trade away my Peking University placement in exchange for a marriage certificate. My world collapsed. I had lost Mr. Cowshed, and now I was to lose everything else. In that abyss of despair, I finally decided to live for myself. I gave up Peking University and chose the National Defense University instead, to dedicate my life to the motherland. With only a snakeskin bag carrying a few worn clothes and Mr. Cowshed's jade pendant, I left behind that place of sorrow. In the library, I often thought of Mr. Cowshed. Sometimes, I would take out the jade pendant and remember him. It was during one of those times that Anna appeared, her eyes locked onto the pendant, shining brightly. I was, of course, aware of Anna. Beyond her beauty, she had a special status. Rumor had it she arrived at the National Defense University escorted by a jeep, personally received by the school leaders. Ever since she first saw my jade pendant, Anna wouldn't leave me alone. Unlike other girls, she was open and unrestrained, caring nothing for rules. Even waiting outside the boys' dormitory at night, Anna could completely ignore others' stares. Looking at the notebook she handed me, I sighed inwardly. I felt it necessary to be clear with Anna. Taking the notebook, I stared into her bright eyes, my expression serious. Anna, please don't come looking for me again. Anna froze. Then her eyes reddened, lips trembling as if to speak but holding back. In the end, she lowered her head and whispered a faint mm. She said nothing more, but her emotions were painfully obvious. Suppressing my pity, I watched her leave. For now, I only wanted to focus on studying and serving my country. Love had never been in my plans. From that night on, Anna never sought me out again. After military training ended, freshmen were given a one-day break. Most chose to leave campus and go shopping. At the National Defense University, not only did freshmen pay no tuition, but they also received a living stipend of 10 yuan per month, a huge sum in 1983. I didn't waste money. As usual, I stayed in the library to study decryption. Anna sat across from me. From her pocket, she took out a jade pendant, identical to mine. The only difference was that mine bore a dragon, while hers bore a phoenix. Together, they formed a pair of dragon and phoenix pendants. I am your fiancé. With that single sentence, Anna nearly made me collapse to the ground. Chapter 15. The library fell silent for several minutes. As a student of the new era, I detested this old-fashioned concept of arranged engagement, especially after being hurt by Willow. My youthful longing for love had already turned into rational caution. I wanted no illusory romance. Love was a matter of conduct. Truth be told, Anna was far too bold. Had this been a few years earlier, she would have been locked away. In the eyes of many, she would have been labeled a female delinquent, forced into a reform class for hooligans. Taking a deep breath, I steadied my emotions, shook my head, and said with a serious expression, Anna, I hope you'll be mindful of your actions. We came to the National Defense University to study, to serve our country and people, not to pursue romance. We didn't know each other before. There's no engagement between us, is there? My warning was clear enough. If she continued, she would end up summoned for a talk with the instructor. Anna seemed to realize her words had been excessive. Spread around, they could have serious consequences. But after days of consideration, she decided to tell me the truth. Pointing at the jade pendant, she began a story. This pendant came in pairs, entrusted to her father and an old friend, with a promise: if both families had a boy and a girl, they would become in-laws. If they were the same gender, they would be sworn brothers. Years passed, and Anna's father never forgot that promise. Unfortunately, the old friend had been sent to labor reform for political reasons, and disappeared without a trace, believing he would never see the pendant again. Anna herself had no plans for marriage. That was why she applied to the National Defense University. Never did she imagine fate would work so mysteriously, that she would see the dragon pendant hanging from my neck in the library. After hearing Anna's story, I fell into silence. It didn't sound absurd. With Mr. Cowshed's vast knowledge, he clearly wasn't an ordinary local. His identity must have once been significant. But he was a casualty of the times. I still didn't know why. After being rehabilitated, he hadn't left that ruined temple, but instead chose to live like a hermit. No wonder he had handed me the pendant with such a strange look. Only now did I realize it was a token of betrothal. Logically, facing a well-born fiancé with a promising future should be considered a gift from heaven. But after Willow's betrayal, I no longer trusted in love. At the National Defense University, if there were to be emotions, they could only be revolutionary emotions. After a moment's hesitation, I handed the dragon pendant back to Anna. I'm not the teacher's child. If I had known its importance, I never would have taken it. Now it can return to its rightful owner. As for marriage, forget it. Without giving Anna the chance to reply, I stood and walked away. Anna sat on the bench, staring at the two pendants pressed together. Together, they formed a perfect full moon. A wave of grievance welled up in her heart. She couldn't explain why, but from the moment she saw George, she felt he was different. His unique, independent temperament, and in his eyes, not only unshakable revolutionary conviction, but also a faint trace of sorrow. It was a gaze she had never seen in anyone her age. Like a bottomless abyss, approach it, and you would be drawn in. Clutching the pendant, Anna stepped to the window. The night sky above the library was beautiful. On the plane trees at the edge of the playground, leaves still flourished, untouched by autumn's call. I returned to the dormitory, sat on the balcony, looked up at the sky, and said nothing. I resolved to study hard from now on, and keep my distance from Anna. With military training complete, Academic classes began. In this era of rebuilding, students' hunger for knowledge was fierce. Within us burned both a strong faith and pure souls. Besides working hard at academics, I also kept up my physical training. Several times, I ran into Anna in the cafeteria. We merely nodded to each other in passing. There had once been rumors about us, so much so that the instructor nearly summoned me for a talk. But as we grew distant, the matter faded away. Most boys breathed a sigh of relief, believing that Anna, that flower, should never belong to just one person. One day, as I was running on the track as usual, I suddenly stopped. Looking ahead, my face darkened instantly. Chapter 16. It was her, Willow. The moment she saw George appear, Willow's attention was entirely captured. She couldn't control her steps as she moved toward him, but one small movement from George made her face instantly turn pale. The boy who once relied on her so much, whose face used to light up with happiness whenever they met, actually took a few steps back. That was the kind of psychological defense reserved only for enemies. Willow's heart felt as if it had been pierced with a gaping hole. She could barely breathe, her face filled with bitterness. Did George truly despise her so much now? Forcing down the ache inside, Willow tried to step forward again, only to see George retreat once more, his expression deeply wounded. George. Before she could continue, I coldly interrupted. This is school. Watch your behavior. Shock flashed in Willow's eyes. Why did those words sound so familiar? Suddenly she remembered, back when George was admitted to Peking University, he had rushed to share the news with her, glowing with excitement. What had she said then? She had instinctively kept her distance, telling him, "This is the courtyard. You must be mindful of appearances." A wave of grievance rose in Willow's heart. Now she finally felt the pain George had endured back then. Her eyes shimmered with sorrow. Drawing in a deep breath, she tried to keep calm. "George, you left without a word. Do you really want to cut me off completely?" At her words, my expression stayed indifferent. I didn't argue, but that cold, detached attitude stabbed Willow's heart like a knife, and she understood what it meant to grow up in a home without love, forced to surrender the best things again and again. Once you give way once, you'll be made to yield for a lifetime. I had already fallen into despair. The only choice left was to erase my identity, live incognito forever, and never make contact again. How desperate must I have been to decide something like that? Even just imagining it made Willow's heart throb painfully. Yet I had lived through over 10 years of such cruelty. How could she even have the face to ask? If I hadn't quietly left, I surely would have been driven to death. Willow raised her hand, wanting to touch my head as she used to when we were children. But halfway up, she met my cold gaze, and her spirit was crushed anew. "I'm sorry." All the words she wanted to say condensed into that single apology. Willow no longer knew what else she could say. I lifted my head to the sky, then lowered my gaze again to the plane trees at the edge of the track. In my mind, an image surfaced, 11 years old, cast out by my parents, squatting beneath that very tree and crying. Back then, Willow had seemed like an angel, bringing me new hope, but it was exactly that hope that had pushed me into the abyss. Even now, my heart ached faintly. Drawing my eyes back, I stared at Willow, my gaze firm. "If you're here to help Makoto reclaim the Peking University placement, then I'm sorry. What's done is done. I won't give it up." Willow's expression changed drastically. She shook her head frantically. "No, I just came to see you." She wanted to tell George that it had all been a misunderstanding, that she had never disliked him, never truly rejected him. But when she recalled her mistakes back then, the words stuck in her throat. She didn't even have the face to say them. "Since you've seen me, you can leave now." I didn't want to interact with Willow. Just seeing her face brought back the pain from 6 months ago. It had taken me half a year to heal. Why did she have to come stir it all up again? Willow's body trembled as she grabbed my hand. Her brows were knit with grief and grievance. "George, why have we become like this?" Her voice shook, her expression racked with anguish. I answered calmly, "That's what I want to ask, too. Why had it come to this?" When Willow chose Makoto, hurting me again and again, I had screamed that question silently in my heart countless times. "It doesn't matter anymore. Sister, this is the last time I'll ever call you that. I wish you and Makoto a long and happy life together. Don't ever come looking for me again." Just as Willow was about to protest, my next words struck her like a thunderbolt, freezing her in place. "Even now, I still thank you for the warmth and hope you once gave me. Please don't make me hate you." Willow stood rigid, her face turning pale as George's figure disappeared from sight. Only then did she collapse to the ground. Endless regret and sorrow surged in her chest. The woman who could take a bullet without flinching now had eyes brimming with tears. Grief etched across her face. In her mind, the image of that boy, George, once filled with admiration, no longer matched the men before her. Willow realized clearly, she really might be losing George. From the plane trees of late autumn, a leaf finally fell, landing softly on Willow's shoulder. Never before had she been so certain of her feelings for George. But by the time she realized it, he was already gone. Chapter 17. The weather in the south was scorching, but Willow felt only an icy chill in the air. Her body went numb, unable to move, as searing heartache struck her belatedly, leaving her dizzy with pain as she stared in the direction George had disappeared. When George slipped away without a sound, Willow's world became a vacuum. The sorrow of losing her beloved engulfed her, and with it, her rationality returned. She could easily detect Makoto's disguises now, and even uncover evidence of his schemes. But why? Each time George was hurt, had she turned a blind eye? For half a year, Willow had been desperately searching for news of George, risking her own future and career. Yet she still couldn't penetrate the defenses of the National Defense University's decryption program. Finally, Sam, unable to watch his daughter drift in despair any longer, reluctantly called up an old friend at the university. The moment Willow learned of George's whereabouts, she rushed there without hesitation. She thought that once they met and she explained, everything would return to the way it was. But when she finally saw George, saw the calm indifference in his gaze, Willow realized just how naive she had been. The look in his eyes no longer carried even a trace of admiration. The boy who once shared everything with her, who had leaned on her emotionally so much, was gone like smoke on the wind. What stood before her was a stranger. Time and again, Willow wanted to explain, but when she recalled all she had done, the words froze on her lips. She could only watch him leave. Like the leaves of a plane tree in autumn, she too would eventually fall to the ground. She stood beneath that tree for a long time, staring at the fallen leaves. In her mind echoed that day years ago, when she held George's hand and promised to give him a home, that they would never be separated. But she had broken that promise. The pain she brought George perhaps surpassed even Makoto's betrayal. At this moment, Willow's expression was dazed, her heart twisted in agony. Now she finally felt the depth of George's despair, his utter loss of hope in his family, and in her. I didn't return to the dormitory. Instead, I wandered the campus, unwilling to face Willow. My once peaceful university life had been thrown into turmoil by her sudden reappearance. My mind in chaos, I unknowingly walked to the library. Gazing at the tightly closed doors, I squatted on the steps, shivering under the cold moonlight. When I was 11, Willow had given me hope. I had spent 7 years loving her, but at 18, it was Willow who personally shattered all my expectations. Now she claimed it had all been a misunderstanding, but the memories of being hurt replayed vividly in my mind. Could I really believe her? At the moment I saw Willow, I knew, I had thought I had cut off all feeling. Yet still, I felt sorrow. In truth, I had never fully let go. Just then, a pair of long legs appeared before me, glowing softly in the moonlight. I slowly looked up, and saw Anna. Anna sat down beside me, both of us gazing at the night sky. Say it out loud, she urged. You'll feel better. My chest was heavy with words I had never spoken. Years of pain nearly drove me insane, locked inside with nowhere to go. Anna's presence, though we hadn't known each other long, gave me enough sense of safety to open up. Under the moonlight, I spoke of my life, the biased parents, the unfaithful fiancé, and the broken self they left behind. My voice was soft, as if I were talking about someone else's story. Anna propped her chin on her hand, listening quietly, one speaking calmly, one listening silently. Time itself seemed to stop. Do you still love her? When I finished, Anna turned her head, curiosity flickering in her eyes. Though her tone was calm, a trace of nervousness slipped through. I thought I would struggle to answer, torn inside, but for some reason, the answer came instantly. No, I don't. I truly didn't love her anymore. After disappointment piled up to the breaking point, I had long since severed myself from both family affection and romantic love. Anna hadn't expected me to answer so quickly. She stared in a daze for a while, then a smile bloomed across her face. Like a spring breeze in March, like fireworks bright in the night, it brought me warmth. I had to admit, I enjoyed being around this kind of Anna. Then tell her, Anna said. Only by cutting off the past can you move toward the future. She stood up, patted my shoulder. Go back, get some rest. After a good night's sleep, tomorrow will be better. I felt my knot of pain unravel. Returning to the dorm, I fell fast asleep. When I woke, the morning sunlight spilled across my face, and I felt light as air. In the days that followed, I attended class as usual, but I often ran into Willow. Whether on the way to class, in the cafeteria, or during evening study, I would see her quietly waiting by the path, gazing at me with gentle, longing eyes. Her military uniform was striking, her beauty and cool grace making her a dazzling figure across campus. Gradually, people began to notice there was some connection between us. In the winter of 1983, when thoughts were still tightly bound and unliberated, matters of romance could easily be turned into accusations of conduct problems. Rumors began to swirl. On Willow's 6th night at the university, the sweltering south finally welcomed a cold rain. I was reading in the dormitory when my roommate said there was a woman standing outside. I immediately knew who it was. After a long silence, I rose and headed downstairs. I felt it was time to speak with Willow, truly speak, once and for all. Outside, I saw her figure blurred in the heavy rain. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward. Chapter 18. The first autumn rain of the year carried a sharp chill. In the hazy downpour, a slim figure stood beneath the dormitory, drenched to the bone, with nothing left but eyes filled with helpless affection. I studied the girl before me, yet my heart remained calm. Once upon a time, if Willow showed even the slightest unhappiness, I would have wanted to pluck the moon from the sky just to make her smile. Now, seeing her so sorrowful and broken, I still felt steady, perhaps even slightly annoyed. Late affection is worth less than grass. The love I had guarded for years, the woman I had sworn to protect for a lifetime, had lost its meaning through endless acts of favoritism and betrayal. When I severed my ties to love and chose the decryption program, Willow then told me it was all a misunderstanding. Perhaps our meeting itself had been a misunderstanding. I placed the umbrella over Willow's head and reached out to wipe the raindrops from her face. That gentle gesture made her eyes shimmer with hope. It's not worth it. I shook my head, a relieved smile spreading across my face. Lifting my gaze past Willow to the plane tree hidden in the curtain of rain, I said, "Thank you for what you once did for me. It was you who helped me survive my coldest winters." Back then, I was truly in despair, even more so than Mr. Cauchy during his struggles. But it was also you who disappointed me little by little. Don't try to cover up what you've done. Scars never vanish. Willow, look at yourself now. You're no longer the sister I once admired and loved. Willow's face changed drastically. Her lips, tinged purple from the cold, trembled as she shook her head desperately. She wanted to tell George that she had always been his sister at heart, always the one who loved him but had never dared to face it. But under my calm, detached gaze, she couldn't utter a single word. I wiped away the water on her face again. That hand, which once gave her countless moments of warmth, now carried only an icy chill that spread through her entire being. Though I stood right in front of her, Willow felt as if I were slipping away. She tried frantically to hold on to me, but my words pierced her like nails driven into her heart, leaving her bleeding inside, her world painted red. In her mind, she heard again my cries of pain and despair when forced by my parents and abandoned by her. She remembered that night when I fell from the second floor, writhing in pain, gasping for breath, looking to her with pleading eyes, only to receive a slap across the face. Perhaps it was that slap that severed my love completely. "George, I'm sorry. I took a week off. I only have this week to see you. If you don't want to be disturbed, I'll just watch from afar. I'll leave tomorrow. But, can you give me one more chance?" Willow wiped her tears, her expression full of longing. I didn't reply. I simply looked at her face, watching her cry, unmoved. At that moment, we both seemed to understand. Willow's body swayed as she closed her eyes in pain. I silently watched her tears fall, but I no longer felt heartache. It meant I no longer loved Willow. I left the umbrella with her and turned toward the dormitory. This time, I wanted to make things final between us, so we would never meet again. Willow, Makoto, and my biased parents, those four could have their happiness together. I was the only one left out, but I did not regret it. This was my choice, my destiny. Having severed ties of love, I needed to light a lamp for myself. Willow threw aside the umbrella and rushed forward, hugging me tightly from behind, her voice trembling with desperation. "George, don't leave me. I was wrong. I was truly wrong." I didn't resist. I let her hold me, eyes closed. I didn't know how long passed, but eventually, the rain stopped, the clouds broke, and the moon emerged, casting its pale light over the plane trees by the playground. Through the clearing sky, Willow clung to my shadow, as if that moment were etched forever in time. Slowly, she released her hold, but inside she felt as though she were being torn apart. Falling to her knees, she wept bitterly. She knew she had completely lost George. At last, she experienced the despair I once felt. The feeling clung like a parasite to the bone, never to be forgotten. She understood, she regretted, but it was too late. Chapter 19. When her leave ended, Willow left the National Defense University. On the day she departed, she did not come to say goodbye to George. She knew George would not see her again, and she understood, he had already severed all ties of love. Willow also knew how terribly wrong she had been. Before coming, she had even held a marriage application in her hand. If George had only written his name, they would have been legally married. But events had unfolded differently. From George's attitude, she could see it clearly. Forget marriage, even face to face, they could never go back to the way things were. Her heart was already shattered, and she had no excuse. It was she herself who had driven him away, sprinkling salt on his wounds, night after night of despair. Now she truly felt how unbearable despair could be. So if you truly love someone, you must choose not to disturb them. Willow would not give up on George. She would atone in her own way, making amends through actions. She would prove to him that she was still the same sister next door who once held his hand and promised that the world would never be lonely. On the day she left, the sky was heavy and gray. As the train carried her away, She looked out at the shrinking city, closing her eyes, then opening them again. A cold, sharp glint flashed in her gaze. Everyone who had hurt George would pay, including herself. On the other side, I knew nothing of Willow's thoughts, nor did I care. Having made things completely clear, I returned to my life as a normal student. My days were filled only with study and physical training. In the first half year, I studied alone. Later, Anna was by my side. From that night, I had learned one truth: I could not live for others' opinions, nor be chained by feelings. In the past, I could not let go. I craved my parents' affection and Willow's approval, and it tore me apart inside. So I stopped longing for my biased, cold-blooded family. They were not worth it. And I stopped caring about the eyes of outsiders when walking with Anna. Of course, there was no romance in it. It was purely for study. Anna surely came from a very good family. She knew so much, and she could obtain the latest study materials. When Anna pulled a book on computer programming from her bag and explained its uses for decryption, I realized instantly I had to seize this opportunity. From then on, Anna stayed by my side, using her family's resources to bring me cutting-edge decryption materials, and I helped her whenever I could. To outsiders, we looked like a couple. Gradually, gossip died down, and tongues stopped wagging. At that time, so-called conduct issues were taken more lightly on campus. We were young, and young people easily accept new things. Especially university students, our minds were opening, ready to embrace new waves of thought. Soon, couples began appearing across campus. The instructor only held one meeting, reminding everyone to mind their boundaries, and never interfered again. So Anna and I walked together, our bond considered a revolutionary kind of companionship, entirely natural. A photo of us studying shoulder to shoulder in the library traveled hundreds of miles away to the district compound. In a dimly lit room, Willow sat on a sofa, head lowered. The floor was littered with empty bottles, the air heavy with alcohol. This was only the second time she had drunk since joining the military. The first time had been the night George confessed his feelings. She drank heavily and wrestled with herself the whole night. The second time was now, after seeing George with Anna. Her heart ached. From the next room came angry shouting. George's parents were punishing Makoto. His vile, despicable schemes had been exposed. His reputation utterly ruined. Forget factory work, even day laborers refused to hire him. With no way to survive, Makoto clung to the Wang household. But his parents no longer spoiled him. For every way he had once harmed George, he now received punishment 100, 1,000 times over. Unable to endure, Makoto knelt before Willow, begging for help. But Willow's punishments were harsher than George's parents. From then on, Makoto lived a life worse than death. Each of them, in their own way, tried to avenge George, hoping for forgiveness. But would George ever care? His parents visibly aged, their faces etched with regret and sorrow, living in misery. Willow refused promotions, remaining in the military, waiting for her chance. As time passed, more than 3 years slipped by. Makoto was tortured until half his life was gone. His eyes sunken with dark circles, his spirit unstable. He truly fell into depression. George's parents, after punishing him each night, hid away to cry. The two of them missed their son desperately. They cried, they knelt, they begged. But Willow never told them anything. It was the punishment they deserved. Finally, graduation season arrived at the National Defense University. That day, Willow received a phone call. She abruptly left the compound. Now it was her turn to atone. Chapter 20. Everyone, take your positions. This mission is of utmost importance. No mistakes are allowed. In the summer of 1987, a wave swept across the nation. Newly graduated college students volunteered to support the Great Northwest. But with it came numerous security concerns. At that time, to be admitted into university was a matter of family honor, and thus every graduate was considered a national treasure. The National Defense University's decryption program was part of this movement, but instead of taking the usual path, it established a research center in the Northwest to secretly conduct computer code-breaking research. It was a mission of the highest secrecy, tied to the future of modern warfare. After graduation, this group of defense students was sent directly to the Northwest. Yet hostile forces considered them prime targets, plotting sabotage at every turn. A special operations brigade was assigned solely for their escort. Willow was the leader of that escort mission, remaining hidden in the shadows to avoid enemy detection. Clad in military uniform, she stood on a mountaintop, eyes sharp as blades as she surveyed the convoy below. Yet whenever her gaze fell on the lead vehicle, it softened. Over the years, Willow had earned numerous military merits, but she refused promotion, waiting only for this opportunity. When the decryption program students were dispatched to the Northwest, she immediately volunteered for escort duty. Ever since George left the district compound, Willow had felt her life had lost its meaning. She wanted to become again the sister who once protected him, to show him she had never truly changed. Her redemption lay in silently guarding him, and once they reached their destination, she would have the chance to be by George's side. That was the only thing she could do. Inside the convoy, I stared out the window at the endless Gobi Desert. The deeper we ventured into the northwest, the harsher the environment grew. Only then did I truly experience hardship beyond the campus walls. The training at school was nothing compared to this. For years of university had changed me greatly. No longer the naive youth, I had matured into steadiness and composure. I graduated at the top of my class, the best representative among all students. This mission to the northwest was a heavy responsibility. Along the way, I felt the convoy stop several times, though we soon moved on. I did not know that outside, multiple ambushes had already been intercepted by the escort brigade. By the time we reached the research center, the escort unit had been reduced from 200 soldiers to just over 100. Such was the ferocity of the battles on the road. Once we arrived, there was no rest. We immediately plunged into work. At the research center, I quickly noticed the communications equipment was outdated. I submitted a report demanding upgrades. Back at school, I had already published several influential papers that offered valuable insight into national information security. The higher-ups assigned me to lead a team, not only to train me, but also to raise our information security to a new level. I did not disappoint. In only 3 months, I revitalized the research center, and the strength of our code defense systems advanced significantly. Just 3 months into my career, I had already earned a first-class merit. Yet during my work, I often felt someone watching me from behind. Each time I turned around, no one was there. I assumed it was just hallucinations from exhaustion. One day, a torrential downpour swept across the Gobi, destroying an important communications station. I was in the middle of a crucial experiment. In a panic, I rushed out to rescue the equipment. The rain was overwhelming, the situation extremely dangerous. I disregarded my own safety, determined to save the station. In the end, I succeeded, but on my way back, I fell into a hidden pit and was trapped inside a mountain cave. The storm cut off contact with the outside. I was stuck there for 3 days. On the verge of death, my vision blurred. Through the haze, I thought I saw a beam of light. Out of that light emerged a familiar figure. She lifted me onto her back and carried me step by step upward. Her body was not strong, but her strength was immense. With bare hands, she carried a man weighing over 100 kg on her back. Climbing to the cave's mouth, the first breath of fresh air after near death felt like a miracle. I longed to thank the one who saved me, but she only set me down, handed me to the medics, and disappeared. I tried to call after her, but no strength remained. Soon, I slipped into unconsciousness. Chapter 21. I lay in the infirmary for 3 days. Once I regained my strength, I immediately began searching for my savior. But everyone kept silent. The director of the research center personally came to me, urging me to focus on my work. Protecting researchers, he said, was their duty. There was no need for me to dwell on it. Anyone else would have done the same. I nodded and didn't overthink it. From the residents' words, I only learned that there had been a special unit, protecting us secretly from the moment we left the university. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. During that time, I developed the second-generation communications system, which greatly enhanced the Army's capability for information-based warfare. Because of this, I was promoted to deputy director of the research center. On the day I was to leave the Gobi, the director invited me for drinks and revealed a cruel truth. Because of the importance of communications research, the center had been under constant enemy attack. In those 3 years, hidden operatives launched more than 70 assaults, all thwarted successfully, but at the cost of many comrades' lives. At least we succeeded, the director said. We defeated the enemy's schemes and fulfilled the mission entrusted to us. Now you can move on to a higher stage, to accomplish even greater things. He pulled out a photo and placed it on the table. After a moment of hesitation, his voice dropped low. I hadn't wanted to tell you, for fear it would distract you, but since you're leaving, I won't hide it any longer. In this protection mission, over 200 soldiers from the special brigade were killed. My whole body trembled, eyes burning. I lifted my glass and said, "Let's drink to them." The director nodded, sighing. "You should be quite familiar with Commander Liu, right?" Commander Liu. My gaze turned puzzled. I didn't know any Commander Liu yet. For some reason, Willow's figure flashed in my mind. I shook my head violently, forcing a bitter smile. By now, Willow should still be in the district compound, likely already married to Makoto, with a child old enough to run errands. How could she possibly be here in the Gobi Desert on a mission? But the director's next words struck me like lightning. Commander Liu was none other than Willow Liu. For 3 years, she had secretly protected me. The one who dragged me from the mountain cave, that had been Willow, who risked her life and injured her leg in the process. On several occasions, when assassins targeted me, it was Commander Liu who shielded me, suffering heavy costs for it. After the second-generation communications system was completed, the Special Brigade had successfully finished their mission and was beginning to withdraw. Willow, however, had fought on the front lines against enemy operatives for years. She had been shot 3 times, one bullet nearly piercing her heart, almost killing her, and still, She refused to leave. She insisted on staying at the front. Today was the day Commander Liu was to depart. The director, likely guessing her connection to me, had kindly given me this reminder, though Willow had sternly warned him not to. I looked at the photo on the table. It was of me and Anna, studying shoulder to shoulder in the library. Though Anna's side of the picture had been torn away, I recognized it instantly. Could it be that Willow had truly been nearby all along? Then why, in 3 years, had she never once shown herself? My feelings were tangled. I remembered the director's words. She had taken bullets for me, saved me multiple times, and yet never asked for recognition, never even wanted to see me. Willow had only ever hidden in the shadows, silently protecting my safety. Suddenly, I remembered the day when I was 11 years old. Crouching beneath the plane tree in tears, Willow had appeared like an angel, taking my hand and promising she would protect me for a lifetime. I had thought that our last meeting had been on the campus of the National Defense University, that I would never see Willow again. But what she had done shook me to my core. I was no longer the naive boy of the past. Yet whenever I thought of Willow's actions, a deep, indescribable sorrow welled up inside me. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the photo and rushed outside. Outside the research center, I caught sight of a jeep pulling away. I shouted toward it, "Willow." There was no response from the vehicle, but in my heart, I was certain Willow was inside. Why wouldn't she answer? Inside the departing jeep, Willow caught sight of George through the rearview mirror. For a moment, her cold, delicate face wavered with emotion, but she quickly forced it down. The guard hesitated. "Commander Liu, should we turn back?" Willow glanced at her empty left sleeve, then closed her eyes. "Keep going." In a desperate battle with the enemy, she had lost her left arm to an explosion, crippled for life. This time, the organization had forcibly ordered her return to receive treatment. Willow had wanted to go on protecting George, but she knew that in her condition, she would only become a burden, so she had no choice but to agree. For 3 years, she had protected George in her own way, but the road ahead was long, and she could no longer accompany him. Inside, Willow's heart was racked with unbearable pain. Countless times she had watched George's busy figure in the laboratory, longing to walk up and keep him company. But each time, memories of how deeply she had hurt him would stop her steps. To truly love someone is to choose not to disturb them, all the more so when, in her current state, how could she ever be worthy of George? George deserved someone better, and so Willow left, without telling George she had ever been there, and without telling him she was leaving. Chapter 22. 10 years later, almost 2 decades into the era of reform and opening, the country had undergone earth-shaking changes. National Defense Information Security, now in its 4th generation, had made tremendous progress. Though not yet at the world's cutting edge, it continued to develop at high speed through the efforts of successive generations. As a defense student who graduated in 1987, after more than a decade of trials, I had grown from a green graduate into an expert in the field of information. I devoted all my time to building the informatization of the armed forces, becoming the youngest leader in the field, and now, the chief expert. I lived year-round in the depths of the desert, leading a frugal and harsh life, never enjoying any privileges. Seeing how hard I worked, the higher-ups forced me to take a vacation. I was practically pushed out of the base, escorted back to the big city. Because of my sensitive identity, protection was mandatory. Jeeps led the way, but I disliked such displays. So after reporting to my superiors, I left on my own with only a guard. My first stop was the National Defense University. To attend the 1998 graduation ceremony, I delivered a keynote speech from the stage. Below me sat rows of fresh-faced students, their eyes filled with admiration. As a star figure of the decryption program, under 40 years old and already seated beside the university president, I had become a living legend, an idol for the students. Looking at those eyes brimming with admiration, I recalled how I once looked at Willow the same way. More than 10 years had passed. My love for Willow had long faded. My memories of her ended with that jeep pulling away in the Gobi Desert. 10 years had gone by, and I had heard nothing from her. I had once tried calling her old unit, hoping to thank her, but I was told Willow had already retired from the army. Sitting on the rostrum, gazing at the students below, future builders of national defense, just like I once was, my thoughts drifted back to my hometown. I felt an urge to see Willow. I couldn't explain it. Ever since being forced into this vacation, I had felt I needed to do something. It wasn't to rekindle romance. At this age, my life was already wholly devoted to the nation. After leaving the university, I immediately returned to my hometown. I didn't alert anyone. I simply walked to the old compound and stood beneath the plane tree. 10 years had passed, but the tree was unchanged. Only the ground beneath it was now paved with asphalt, no longer the yellow dirt of the past. The compound itself remained unrenovated, with red brick walls and green tiles. I stood outside, looking at the home where I once lived. I felt no longing for my biased parents. They had Makoto. Even if I had died outside, I doubted they would have shed a tear. This trip home had two purposes: to visit Sam, and to thank Willow face to face. But after some inquiries, I learned that Sam had been transferred elsewhere, leaving the city. As for Willow's retirement, no one knew much. Perhaps she had gone north with Sam. As for my parents, the last people I wished to see, they too had moved away, for reasons unknown. Relieved, though tinged with disappointment, I decided not to linger. Time was short, and my heart was already set on returning to work. I stood once more beneath the plane tree for a long time. During that moment, I received a phone call. It was Anna, my wife. "You've been away so long. Now that you're on vacation, aren't you coming home? Your son misses you. Daddy, Daddy." Hearing my son's voice, a gentle smile softened my usually stern face. I hung up, got into the car, and left. A gust of wind swept past, and from the plane tree, a leaf fluttered down. Autumn had come. George never noticed that. Inside Willow's house, by the window, a figure stood quietly watching him leave. Willow had not gone north with Sam. She had stayed behind in the compound, waiting. She didn't even know what she was waiting for, only that she waited. But when George finally returned, Willow found she did not have the courage to face him. She could only remain in the shadows, just as she once silently protected him in the Gobi Desert. Before, she had felt too ashamed to see him. Now, she simply lacked the courage. All Willow could do was give her blessings. When she was sure George's car had left, she slowly went downstairs, thanking the neighbors. If they hadn't kept her secret, George would surely have discovered the truth. Carrying a basket, she walked to the cemetery. There lay the graves of George's parents. Not far away stood a lonely grave. 5 years earlier, Makoto had finally broken under the torment. In a fit of madness, he had taken a knife and killed the very parents who had once doted on him. Suffering from severe depression, after killing them, Makoto slit his wrists in the bathroom. When people discovered it, the house held only 3 corpses. Willow had used her connections to suppress the news, never telling George. She hadn't wanted him to suffer. Gazing at the gravestones of George's parents, Willow sighed, then lifted her eyes toward the sky. "George has come back. He's doing well. You don't need to worry. You've gone, but the living are the ones who suffer. We did wrong, and we deserve our punishment. Perhaps this is heaven's will. I hope George will always be happy. That's what you would want too, isn't it?" Willow rose and left. In the setting sun, her figure stretched into long, lonely shadows. So solitary, so desolate. She remembered the day George, at 17, had confessed his feelings. His young face flushed red, his eyes bright with excitement and hope, like a rising sun. If only she had said yes then, perhaps everything would have been different. But there are no ifs. She could only live in endless regret until her life's end. In the garrison district, I returned home and saw my wife sitting on the sofa, gently coaxing our son to sleep, humming a lullaby. Her face glowed with maternal warmth. Anna and I had married in our 30s. I had never imagined she would wait for me all that time. I walked to the window, looking at the child in her arms. That tender little face so closely resembled my own from childhood. I couldn't resist reaching out to touch him. Anna shot me a glare and whispered, "He just fell asleep. Don't wake him. You can take your turn later." I gave an awkward smile. In this home, I never had much say. Looking at my wife and child, a wave of guilt welled up inside me. All these years, I had been away at work, with no time to be with them. Naturally, I felt remorse. Gently, I embraced my wife from behind, breathing in the fragrance of her hair. Closing my eyes, we had a complete family. No matter how busy I became, I would love my wife and child. I would never let them suffer as I once had in my childhood. Everything would be all right.